we started with, I forgot today to bring the delicious cookies that Grandma made. So Gary threatened that he was going to leave, and he's still here. He's still here. Now, I did find backup cookies. True, did find backup cookies. Nevertheless, I told Gary that this is connected to what we're going to talk about today. It's very interesting, in a very interesting way. We are just 2 weeks away from Shavuos. And Shavuos is the time where God gave us the Torah, and really the time where we entered into what some would call the marriage with God and the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. That's where it really happened. So God took us out of Egypt. We were preparing really for the moment at Sinai where there was this revelation, there was this awesome union that took place between the Jewish people and Almighty God. That being said, we're going to focus a little bit on this relationship and see how really relationships in our own life, how we look at them, how we view them. And beauty is not in the eyes of the beholder, maybe we'll come out with, perhaps. We'll get there by focusing on a verse that we say every Friday night. Before the Kiddush, there is a custom to recite the Eishes Chayil. After we sing the Shalom Aleichem, then we say a chapter of Proverbs chapter 31. We sing a song, Eishes Chayil Meyimsa, a woman of valor. In verse number 30, we say a line, it's like a nice part of the song that we sing. Sheker hachein vehevel hayofi isha yiras Hashem hitisalo. We're talking about a woman of valor in this. And it translates, you see, source number 1, charm is deceptive and beauty is vain. A God-fearing woman is to be praised. That's the verse. The verse, we sing it every Friday night, but it's not just a song, it's not just connected with Shabbos. This comes from already the book of Proverbs. And it's something which is to be studied by everyone. It's a piece of Torah to be studied. So what exactly does this mean? Sheker hachein. Charm is deceptive. Charm is false. Why is it false? Behevel hayofi, beauty is vain. Okay, maybe some will understand that. Yeah, you can understand beauty is vain, vanity. That probably we can understand. Isha yiras Hashem hitisal. It's all about the fear of God. The God-fearing woman is to be praised. It says the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin, charm is deceptive. What does this mean? Zed doirish shel Moshe. This refers to the generation of Moses. Huh? Hevel hayofi. Beauty is vain. Zed doirish shel Yeshua. This refers to the generation of Joshua. Davar acher. Others learn. Sheker hachein zed doirish shel Moshe v'Yeshua. Charm is deceptive. This refers to the generations of Moses and Joshua. Behevel hayofi. Beauty is vain. Zed doirish shel Chizkiah. This refers to the generation of Chizkiah. Okay. Yiras Hashem hitisal, continues the Talmud. A God-fearing woman is to be praised. Zed doirish shel Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Eloi. This refers to the generation of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Eloi. Omru alav al Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Eloi. They said about Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Eloi, shoyer shisha tamidim miskasim talis echad. There was one talis that they needed for 6 people. They would fit 6 people under one talis. That's all they could afford. But and yet they would engage in the study of Torah. They were poor, they were persecuted, and yet they still studied the Torah. That's a God-fearing woman is praised, refers to that generation. Anyone understand what we're talking about over here? I mean, the verse is strange enough, and the Talmud seems to make it even stranger. We think we're talking about a woman over here, and then the Talmud tells us we're talking about generations of Moses, Joshua, Chizkiah, and Yehuda b'Rabbi Eloi. So how do we make sense of all this? But even more than that, there's a deeper question over here. And that is as follows. You know, the verse doesn't say, what do people think today is in style? I don't know, some brand name.
Brandon, you tell us.
some I don't know, some fancy brand name. Torah doesn't say, oh, this is vanity. This is deceptive. That's not real. Why? Because obviously that's vanity. It's obvious that we don't even engage with this. The Torah is calling it chen. If the Torah calls it charm, that means it's really charm. It's real charm. It's not some strange perception that some ignorant or vain people may have. No. Torah is defining it as charm. Torah is defining it as beauty. If Torah is defining it as charm and beauty, so then why are you calling it deceptive and vain? You can't have both ways. If you tell me it's not charm, so then don't call it charm. Say what you think is charm, the misconception that you have. But we're saying, no, we're defining it as charm. We actually think that it's charm. We actually think that it's beauty.
Charm is deceptive.
So now, why are you calling it by these derogatory words, sheker, false or deceptive, and hevel, vain, vanity? This is the question that was asked by the Rebbe in 1972. And then we have to understand, how does this now apply to the generation of Moses? What's the connection between charm and Moses, between beauty and Joshua? What's the idea that when they would needed one talus for 6 people, that was considered to be praiseworthy? How do we make sense of all of this? So in order to understand this, we have to first understand as follows. The verse is referring to dedication to Torah study. That's what the verse is referring to. And the verse is telling us that there are 3 levels in Torah study. There's one level called charm. There's a type of Torah study that's called charm. There's a type of Torah study which is called beauty. And there's another type of Torah study which is called God-fearing. You have 3 levels, 3 categories.
What's the third one?
Fear of God.
Fear of God. Okay.
Fear of God. Now that we know that we have 3 categories of Torah study, now let's go back. You should know that the first category of Torah study, which we call charm, chen in Hebrew, you should know that's sheker. That's deceptive. It's Torah study, but it's deceptive. The second category that we call beauty, you should know it's beauty, but vain. Hevel. The third category, which we call God-fearing, that you should know, that's praiseworthy. That's the one that people are going to praise. So now we have to understand. Moses was the one who received the Torah from God on Mount Sinai. Moses was the first teacher, right? Moses is the one who taught Torah to the Jewish people. The generation of Moses was the generation that witnessed, that experienced Mount Sinai. If anyone ever understood Torah, it was them. They were there when it was spoken. They were there when it was revealed, and they had Moses to ask all their questions to. No one knew Torah better than the generation of Moses. So how are we calling it sheker? How is that deceptive? How is their form of Torah study deceptive? What's wrong with them? How can we possibly say about them that there was something wrong with their Torah study? As a matter of fact, their entire generation, the generation that left Egypt, which is the generation that received the Torah 50 days later, that generation is called a Dor Deah, the generation of wisdom, of knowledge. They were the knowledgeable generation because that's what they did. They studied Torah. What else did they live in the desert for 40 years studying? Their time was put to the study and occupation of Torah. And yet we're coming along, not us, the Talmud, the verse in Proverbs coming along and saying, sheker, deceptive. So there was something false about it. What could possibly be false about that? So let's get to another question now, which is, what's the difference between charm and beauty? What's the distinction between charm and beauty? In Hebrew, chen and yofi. They could be used together, but the verse is separating them, and we have to try to understand what can possibly be the difference. So if you jump to the text right before source number 3, it says charm versus beauty. You have the next page? Charm versus beauty. You got that? Page 5. So to explain, charm is something that transcends logic. For example, the Talmud says that a place is charming to its residents, and even if it's bad, they see it as good. This is a natural phenomenon. A place is charming to its residents, even if they can't explain why. This is true regarding charm in general. Beauty, by contrast, is something that can be explained logically based on its objective parameters. Now that we have this, hold this for a second, and we're going to flesh out this idea even more with a story from, you said you were studying the Torah, from the book of Kings, Malachim. This is from Kings 2. What's the story? The story is that after Elijah the prophet, who is the successor of Elijah the prophet? Elisha, the great prophet Elisha. And Elisha was with the city, with the residents of Jericho, and they came to him with a request. What was the request? And the people of the city said to Elisha, behold, the city is a good place to live in, as my Lord sees, but the water is bad, and the land causes people to die. So he said, take me a new jug and put salt therein, and they took it to him. And he went out to the source of the water and threw salt there, and he said, what did he say? So as the Lord said, I have cured these waters. There will no longer be death and bereavement from here. And the water became cured until this day, like the word of Elisha that he spoke. What did the residents come to Elisha saying? What do they want from Elisha? They said, this city is a fantastic city to live in. This is the most beautiful city to live in. However, when you drink the water, people are dying and there's illness. So we need you to help us out over here, right? Simple question. If the water is killing people, how good of a place is it to live? The water is killing the residents, but we love it here. Fantastic place. No, yeah, it's a disaster. Everyone should pick themselves up and move, right? What are you guys doing? You're drinking poisonous water. You come with the complaints, fix the water, but everything is great. No, it's terrible here, they should have said. They didn't say that. They said it's a beautiful, we love it here. We have one problem. The problem is the water. The water is deadly. Why? Why? It seems to us illogical. You know why? Because people, as we quoted before, beauty falls to the people that are inhabiting it. People feel like my house is great. I love my home. We don't want to move. People don't like moving. When a visitor comes over, they show you this is wrong and that's wrong, and you need something new here, and you need something new there. But when you're living in it, for you, it's fantastic. It doesn't mean that there's no issues with it. There could be issues. But the general premise is that over here, it's fantastic. Over here, it's really great. The quote, the words that he said earlier, which is important words to remember, a place is charming to its residents. That's the quote. A place is charming to its residents. And even if it's bad, they see it as good. That's why the people of Jericho, it was charming to them. It was bad, but they see it as good. Now, let me ask you, is that logical? Does that make sense? No. This does not make any sense. It's not something you can explain. Charm is not something, why you find this place charming, you can't explain. Because logic will say the water is deadly, get out of here. It's a terrible place to live. But for you, you see it as charming. Rabbi Yochanan said in the Talmud Sota, Rabbi Yochanan said in the second paragraph of source 4, There are three graces: the grace of a place upon its inhabitants, there is the grace of a woman upon her husband, and the grace of a purchased item upon its buyer. Beauty is something that can be explained. A person can explain why he or she thinks that this specific item is beautiful to them. But charm is not logic. Charm is an attraction. And something that you're attracted to is something which is transcending your logic. It's something that cannot be explained. Why am I attracted to this? I don't know. But there's something inside of me which is pulling me over here. The town is charming. My home is charming to me. The same can be said of Torah study. There is a form of Torah study which is called charming. There is a form of Torah study which is called beautiful. And then there's the form of Torah study which is called Yiras Hashem, the fear of God. So what's the form of Torah study which is called charming? This is the generation of Moses. So let's understand let's understand the generation of Moses. The generation of Moses, as I said earlier, was the greatest generation ever in terms of their connection and their knowledge to the study of Torah. So let's read over here on page number 7. There's a level of Torah study termed charming. This is the very great level of study achieved in the generation of Moses, when they studied with great passion and excitement and were very successful in their studies. We are told the Torah was given specifically to those that ate the manna. Nevertheless, we're told that charm is deceptive. Right? Remember, we had the question. What can possibly be deceptive? This refers to the generation of Moses. Why? Because it's charming. In other words, they studied Torah because they recognized that it was charming in the eyes of God, and they therefore found it charming as well, in a way which cannot be logically explained. In fact, it would be surprising if the Jewish people then did not study Torah. It would be surprising if they did not have the excitement to study Torah. So their study wasn't something that permeated their entire being, which is the defining nature of truth, as opposed to deception. So yes, it's true that the generation of Moses had a unique relationship with Almighty God. But let's understand for a moment. A couple gets married. Let's talk about relationships for a second. A couple gets married. Let's talk from an outsider, from the spectator. We're observing, we're watching. They get married. How do you think the relationship? How would you define now their relationship? Right after the day after, a week later, we call it the honeymoon stage, right? It's so charming. Look at them, right? Now, if someone were to ask you, you'd ask yourself the following question. Is this the ultimate, most best type of relationship that exists? This couple right in front of us, do they have a real relationship over here? Just look at them right now. Look how in love, they're in la la land. Is that real? Is that the ultimate level that we're trying to reach? Do they even have a relationship? So one thing we know is that right now they're very attracted to each other. That we know for sure. How long is this going to last? Good question. How long is it going to last? Will it be able to withstand any arguments and fights and debates and life challenges? You tell me, is it possible to know? Huh? Every couple gets married thinking they're going to stay married forever. But we know today in America for sure, over 50% of marriages end in divorce. So what happened? When they got married, they thought they were going to get divorced? No. But you see that at least today, 50% of the marriages were fake. What we saw in the beginning was all deceptive. That charm, that attraction was why? Why was because it didn't permeate the existence of both of them. It was a charm, it was an attraction, but it didn't fully permeate their beings. When God gave the Jewish people the Torah at Sinai, it was love, it was charming, there was attraction over there. And the Jewish people, of course, we were going to study Torah. We were in the honeymoon stage. We were just coming off the high, the wedding at Mount Sinai. All we're going to do is, this is what we do now. How long would that last? Is it going to last forever? Well, if we would just pause it right there, if we wouldn't know anything else in history, if we would just pause that generation right there, all we can say is there's a lot of attraction, there's a lot of charm, but charm is deceptive. We have no idea how this is going to end up. We have no idea how long this is going to last. And therefore, at best, the Torah study, this form of relationship is, in Hebrew, we'll call it chen. It's unbelievable, but it's not permeated. It doesn't run through. We don't know because it's never been tested. And we're not sure when it is tested, how much pressure it would be able to withstand. That's the first stage. In Hebrew, we know the word for truth in Hebrew is emes. Emes means truth. How do we spell emes? Emes is Aleph, Mem, Sof. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Mem is the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And Sof is the final letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Truth is something which exists in the beginning all the way through up until the very end. It permeates the entire existence. It runs through. Truth never changes. As a matter of fact, in the Talmud, in Jewish liturgy, in writings, there's a saying called the deceptive river. What was a deceptive river? If it's a river, it's not deceptive. It's a fake river? What does that mean? It's a fake river. The Talmud says this refers to a river which every 7 years would dry. It would be flowing. And if you walked there in the middle of the second year, you would see water flowing. The river was flowing with water, right? But it's fake. It's not a real. It's not authentic. It's deceptive. Why? Because every 7 years, this place dries up. It's not true. Truth is something which never changes. It's always there. The beginning, the middle, and the end. So if we would take this idea of Aleph, Mem, and Sof, and we would apply it now to in biological terms, the beginning, the middle, and the end. In our own biology, this would refer to the head. Aleph is the head, the top, the beginning. The Mem is the middle, the Lev, the heart. And the Sof refers to the feet, all the way on the bottom. We can study Torah from a place of our head, which means when times are good, which means when we understand, when we have a breadth of knowledge, we have an open door to Moses, we have tremendous experience, firsthand experience that no one can take away from us. That's the Aleph. That refers to the head. That's the beginning. The worst natural circumstances is when you have no understanding, you have no feeling, all you have is a foot. A foot moves. It's the lowest part of the body. All it does is walk. It does a job. It gets a job done. It gets you from one place to another. Are you ready to study Torah then as well? Would you study Torah even without a relationship, even without having a first-hand experience, even without having an open door to Moses, even without having some great teacher and guide? Would you still put in the work? If yes, that's true. That means it runs through the full spectrum of life, from all the good, the best of times, all the way down to the worst of times. That demonstrates a real deep, powerful and everlasting relationship. So let's continue. On the bottom of page 8, on your source sheets, the bottom of page 8. This could not be assessed in the generation of Moses, when Torah study was charming without the need to compel oneself to study. The head, which controls the entire body, felt the need to study Torah passionately and to be a Torah entity. We cannot say regarding such a state that it is to be praised and it can't be called true, something that will remain consistent without change. It hasn't been tested, so we can't know how they would act if the circumstances would be different. The potential exists, but it hasn't yet been expressed because the opportunity hasn't yet arose. This is the beginning stages of life, the beginning stages of the Jewish people, the beginning stages of every relationship. Now let's move on to the next one. What do we call the next one? It wasn't charm, but we called it beauty, right? And we said, in contrast to charm, which is not grounded in logic, but it's grounded in attraction, which beauty is logical. I can explain to you why I find this beautiful. This, we said, refers to the next generation of Jews, the generation of Joshua, or some say it refers to the generation of Chizkiah. So what was unique about the generation of Joshua? They were the generation that entered into the land of Israel. They weren't the generation that left Egypt. That was their parents. They weren't the generation that experienced Sinai. That was their parents. They were the next generation, post-desert. They left the desert and entered into the land of Israel. So they didn't eat the manna from heaven. They didn't have the clouds of glory protecting them. They didn't have the miracles of getting clean clothes and fresh clothes all the time. They didn't have water from a miraculous well of Miriam. They didn't have all of these things. What did they have? What did they have? So now we know they didn't have the charm. They didn't have that ultimate magnetic pull because of firsthand experience that their ancestors, their parents had. What they could have was logic. They used their logic. And logic dictated certain things to them. They saw with their own eyes a Joshua. They saw with their own eyes the elders of the Jewish people. They saw with their own eyes how these leaders were conduits and prophets and agents of God. That they did experience. They may have not had firsthand knowledge or firsthand experience with revelation at Sinai or these other fantastic miracles that their parents had. But they still had a Joshua. They still had a leader. They still had other greats, other prophets, other sages, elders of the Jewish people, as they were called back then, through whom blessings were apparent. So what did they see? They saw how when you listen to Joshua, what happens? The walls of Jericho fall. They went into Israel. The first place went to was Jericho. It was surrounded by a wall. We didn't know how we would conquer the city. And what happened? By miracle, you read the book of Joshua, and the wall sank into the ground. Miraculously, the whole wall sank into the ground. But it didn't just go 1, 2, 3, snap your fingers, and now it's going to happen. Like God said, at the strike of midnight, smack at midnight, all firstborns are going to be struck and killed in Egypt. That's not how it went. No, when you give a look in the book of Joshua, there was a ceremony, so to speak. It was a process. There were things that had to be done in order for the wall to fall. And likewise, they saw similar acts that when you follow the word of God, when you follow the word of Joshua, when you put in the effort and do what you're supposed to do, blessings happen. Blessings come your way. So it's, in other words, we have a very logical relationship over here. We see that if you do what's right, if we study Torah, we receive blessing from Almighty God. And this type of a relationship existed all the way past Joshua, all the way through, as long as you had someone of that caliber of person like Joshua, to continue to lead the Jewish people. So although it wasn't charm, it was beauty. The second stage of the Jewish people was a stage of beauty. If someone were to ask a Jew, if you would pick out a Jew right now from the times of Joshua, and past Joshua too, because it goes all the way to Chizkiah, follow that all the way down, and you would say, why do you serve God? Why are you studying Torah? You would ask this person, right? Pull them out. I pluck out around them, Jew. Why are you studying Torah now? What would they tell you? They'd give you a reason. They explain to you why it's beneficial. They explain to you why it's logical. If you were to go back to the time of Moses and pull out a Jew around them and say, why are you studying Torah now? They look at you like, why am I studying? I can't explain to you. Why are you attracted to somebody? Why? This is the way it is. This is the way I'm wired. Because my experience, when I'm in their presence, I'm just pulled. I'm pulled to them. There's something in me that's pulled to there. That's what the Jew in the time of Moses would say. So there's a difference in the reaction, in the response between the generations of Moses and the generations that followed Moses. But the verse is not happy with either of these two. One is deceptive and one we call vain. So the verse is obviously not happy with either of these. What does the verse say is virtuous? Or in the words of the verse, praiseworthy? That is a woman who fears God. Isha Yiras Hashem. What's the example given for the woman who fears God? The generation of Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Loi. That in his days, what did they have? Who remembers? One talis for how many people? 6 people. You come to shul, you walk up the steps, you open up the closet, you get a talis. There, they had 1 talis for the whole shul. That's all they could afford. What times are we talking about? We're talking about a time after the destruction of the Second Temple, after the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, the failed rebellion of Bar Kokhba, where the emperor at the time, Hadrian, made terribly harsh decrees against the Jewish population. 200. He called what was called Gzeiras Hashma, the decrees of conversion, or abandoning the religion. And he made decrees: you're not allowed to circumcise, and you're not allowed to keep kosher. Everything was government forced assimilation. That's what the idea was. To force, how are we going to get rid of the Jew problem? There's always a Jew problem. The way you're going to get rid of the Jew problem was to force them to assimilate. How do you force Jews to assimilate? Strip them of Torah, and it's just inevitable. That's what's going to happen. They're going to assimilate. So if you forcefully remove from them any Torah, or all Torah, and you tell them there's no Shabbos, there's no circumcision, there's no prayer, there's no Torah study, there's no synagogue, there's no education, in a short time, they're just going to become, by default, non-Jews, because there's no other option for them to be. So this was the time of Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Loi. He lives through this period of time. In addition to that, they built a pagan city above the destruction of Jerusalem. So on top of Jerusalem, they built a pagan city. And on the Temple Mount, he built a pagan god called Jupiter. And he said everyone has to worship this god that they built and put it on the Temple Mount, this Jupiter god. So you have no rabbis, you have no leaders, you have no Shabbos, you have no way really to earn a livelihood in a comfortable way. So people are poor, people are persecuted, and you have people that are refusing to comply with the decree. So what happens if you tell the government no? What they do? It wasn't everyone has due process. It's not how it worked. You said no. So then they killed you. If they didn't kill you, they tortured you. They beat you. They gave you lashes. They made your life miserable. That's what happened. So now, if you were to go to a Jew and pluck them out and ask them, why are you observing? What would they tell you? What would they tell you? Charm. Ain't no charmer. Beauty. There's no beauty in this. So why would you be doing this? There's only one response. This is what God wants. There's no personal benefit, no personal joy in this for me. On the contrary. I'm hurt because of it. Physically, I'm pained. I'm persecuted. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi, they would come to shul in their state of poverty, and they would put a talus around 6 people, and they would study Torah. This is Yiras Hashem. This is fear of God. And if you want to know how, we live in America today. In America today, thank God, we live in a blessed country. We're afforded freedom to do a lot of things that Jews in other places of the world today, and certainly in previous generations, couldn't and wouldn't afford that opportunity. So it's easy for us today. It's like a Jew that was beaten, a Jew that was tortured because of their being Jewish. Although, unfortunately, sadly, it's becoming a little bit in the news lately. Nevertheless, on scale, it's nothing compared to what used to be for the Jewish people. So you ask yourself a question. If I would have been there, I would have been that Jew, what would I do? What would I do? How would I respond to the decree? What would my reaction be? Would I be ready to take a blow? Would I be ready to take lashes? Would I be ready to get whipped? Would I be ready to give up my life? The question that has to be asked. Let's read source number 5. Source number 5, middle page 11. Rabbi Nosson Oimer, this is from the Mechilta. Rabbi Nosson said, the verse says, those who love me and those who keep my commandments. Elu Yisrael Shen Yoshvin, this refers to the Jewish people that sit in Eretz Yisrael, Benoisim Nafshem al mitzvahs, and they give their life for the fulfillment of mitzvahs. Malach Yotzei Lahardik, they go to a person and they ask him, why are you being led to your death? And he responds, because I circumcised my son. Malach Yotzei L'Sarif. They ask a person who's being burned, is being led to being burned. Why are you doing this? And the answer is, because I studied Torah. Malach Yotzei L'Sarif. Why are you being led to be crucified? Because I ate matzah, he replies. Malach Loika Me'er Pargal. Why are you going to be lashed with 100 lashes? Because I held the lulav. And it says, Ashirukesi base ma'avoye. From being beaten in the home of my beloved. These blows caused me to become beloved to my Father in heaven. In other words, what did they reply? We take it, this is who we are, we're Jewish. This is what Jews do. There's no question in our mind. We don't ask. We're not looking for an explanation. We're not looking for any charm. We're not looking for anything out of it. We do this because this is what the Jewish people do. We're Jewish and this is what Jews do. Why do we circumcise? Because this is what Jews do. If you ask a Jew during the time of Moses why, they'll tell you, what do you mean why? It's the most beautiful thing in the world. You ask the time of Joshua, they'll explain to you all the great benefits of it. You ask a Jew during the time of Yehuda Rabbi Loi, they don't see no benefit, they don't see nothing. All they tell you is, because this is what our ancestors did, this is the way we do it. That's it. Because we're Jewish. This is the way a Jew lives, and that's the way we behave. So 1972, it wasn't that long ago. Jews came out of the former Soviet Union. And the former Soviet Union This is the way Jews lived during the communist terrible times then. And it wasn't for a few years, for decades and decades and decades. This was programmed to get Jews and to schlep them away from being Jewish. So 1972 Jews came out. And who was left there? Religious Jews were left were Lubavitchers, Lubavitch Chassidim. And they came out looking like Lubavitch Chassidim with big beards and long coats. They were religious Jews that were emerging from Russia. And many people there were like blown away. Wow. You guys look like this? Like, really? This could exist? This could exist over there? And the Rebbe spoke about it when they came to at the Farbrengen, and the Rebbe spoke about it. And the Rebbe compared their self-sacrifice to the self-sacrifice of the generation of Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Lloyd. It was the same thing that they lived through. Persecuted for being Jewish is exactly what these people lived through, and they had no benefit. There was no beauty in being Jewish. There was no beauty in being Jewish. So the Rebbe said like this on page 12. He was born in a particular country where his father was also raised under such circumstances that he has never seen open Torah observant life. He's never seen anything related to Torah mitzvahs that wasn't associated with persecution. Imagine. He has no way out, no logical expectation that he will ever be redeemed from this state which he has been in place for more than 50 years already. 50 years is a period referred to by the Torah as eternity, a yovel. So based on a Torah of an olam, so based on the Torah calculation, he has no way of ever being redeemed from his situation. Nevertheless, when it came to observing Shabbos and Yom Tov, and there was only one garment for 6 people, it didn't hold them back. They wrapped themselves in one garment and they studied Torah. When such a person is asked, why do you study Torah? Do you see any charm in it? He has no choice but to answer no, he doesn't see it. He hasn't personally witnessed God's presence. When he goes out to the street, he sees vengeful enemies. When he comes home, he needs to be careful in case he's being listened to through the wall or the window. He even needs to be careful of those who live with him under the same roof. You understand? There were families that in the family, there were 1 or 2 members of the family that were communists. And they would go and rat out the rest of the family if they knew that this was terrible, terrible times. It is possible that the next day one of them will be pressured, and who knows if he'll be able to withstand the test. The Talmud says even about Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, that had they been tortured, the Talmud says, it knows what would have happened. What would have happened? You want to know what would have happened? Rav said, had they flogged Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah instead of casting them into the fiery furnace, they would have been induced to worship the graven image. Can you imagine what we're talking about over here? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are people who, colleagues of Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel, after the destruction of the first temple by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians. So he decided, I spoke about this a few weeks ago, he decided he's going to make a big god. This is going to be, it's a symbol of the eternity of the Babylonian Empire. Everyone had to bow down to it. And they said, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are not going to bow down to it. And he said, you don't bow down to it, we're gonna throw you into the furnace. And they said, do what you need to do, but we're never going to bow down to this. These are great prophets, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And it says over there how they lit the furnace, and the people that went to open the door, they were burned from the heat. But Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were put into the furnace, they weren't harmed, they weren't burned. A miracle happened. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah emerged miraculously, and we know they're like historic figures. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah went on self-sacrifice. They were ready to give their life in public. They wouldn't bow down to this. And comes along Rav, hundreds of years later, and Rav, the great sage, Talmudic sage Rav, he says, had they been tortured instead of being thrown into the furnace, they would have bowed down. You understand how difficult it is to withstand torture? They didn't have rules of torture like America. No. Go to the Middle East. They show you what torture means. This is the same barbaric torture that the Babylonians would have done. There's no withstanding that type of pressure. It's not humanly possible. And yet we see that emerging from the former Soviet Union, and we see in the generation of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Loi, even though they were persecuted and they would have been tortured, yet these Jews remained faithful and observant Jews. These are greater than Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who the Talmud says wouldn't have. But these Jews, we have living proof that it could be done. Jews were tortured for being Jewish, and they didn't bow down to any foreign god. They would not give up on being Jewish. This is the reality. This is history. People are still alive today. This is worthwhile to stop for a moment to think about this. Take this person who walked out of Russia, take this person in the generation of Rabbi Loi, and speak to them in a beautiful conversation, go out to dinner with them, and ask them, please explain to me how this works. This person sees no charm, no beauty. He sees no reward in this world. He sees no reward in the world to come. Because his study is in hours that are neither day nor night, because he's afraid that he might get caught and his child will be taken away. He has no books to study from. He has no teacher. He has no yeshiva. He has nothing. You can imagine what that type of study looks like. And this is what the Torah says. This is the ultimate. He doesn't see no beauty in it, and still he does it. There was no beauty, there was no charm. We know on Yom Kippur we read the story of Jonah. We're not going to go through the whole story now, but when they found Jonah on the ship and they woke him up, they didn't know who he was. They said, "Who are you?" He said, "Who are you?" He responded to them. He said, "Ivri anochi. I am a Jew. I'm an Ivri. And I fear God." That's what he said. I fear God. This line, ask a Jew who had to live through persecution, why are you still Jewish? Why didn't you just give it up and resign to a much more beautiful and more comfortable and much more luxurious life? Why did you do this? All he responds and says is because I fear God. That's why, because I have fear of God. Says the verse, this is praiseworthy, right? You think I fear God, there's nothing in it. But when we talk about the word praiseworthy, interesting, we talk about the word praiseworthy, right? She is praised. Let's go back to the verse, see what the verse said. Is to be praised. Who praises someone? Not self-praise. We're not talking about self-praise, we're talking about others. Others praise, right? We're talking about from the observers. We're observers over here. We're watching. What do we see? We see three types of Jews, or one Jew living in three types of circumstances. We see the spectrum of life from the Aleph to the Mem to the Taf, to being fully pulled and inspired beyond transcending any type of logic in the most beautiful, most resonating way. And we have the logic, which is maybe less, but still everything is beautiful for me. And then we have the Jew, the circumstance, the time where it's very, very tough. Tough because outside physical pressures, and also tough because I don't have an open door to Moses. I don't even have an open door to Joshua. I don't have a Rebbe that I could walk into and get advice from. I don't see God's miracles anywhere in life. I feel like I'm in darkness. I don't feel nothing. I don't even feel good about being Jewish. If you want to be truthful, someone may say. Nevertheless, I still observe because it's what God wants. That's the reality. When someone sees this, the people around you say, that's the person who has truth. That's the one who carries truth. The one who's able to still remain, even during the dark times and difficult times, That's the relationship that I want to have. I don't want to have a relationship with my spouse only based on attraction that's never been tested, or because it makes sense logically why we should live and be married to each other. I want a type of relationship that no matter what the circumstances, no matter what God challenges us with, we're going to be together. Ask why? Only because we're one unit. I can't, though you won't have a good explanation for why. Never, but never will we separate. Now, if we're able to reach that level, this now goes all the way back to the beginning. This shows us now that when you first got married, which was based on attraction, that was real. Now, in hindsight, we get that benefit of seeing how that was a real attraction. That was real love. That was real commitment. But you only see that later on. You don't see that in the beginning. So the praiseworthy, we actually are bringing praise to the generation of Moses in a strange way. When we Jews observe today, thousands of years post the giving of the Torah at Sinai, generations upon generations removed from that experience and those miracles, where we don't see open miracles today. We don't see God's open hand in a revealed way. We don't get to sense anything like that. We're so far removed from it. On the contrary, we're inundated with secular thinking. We're inundated with an environment which tells you to strip God and holiness from your life, and yet you still observe. You should know that we are actually doing a favor for the Moses generation, because we're proving that Judaism in our relationship with God is everlasting. It can never be destroyed. No one can take it away from us. There's Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Zaltzman. He was born in Russia, the former Soviet Union. And in 1971, he was 15 years old, and his family came out from Russia, and then they came to Crown Heights, and they came to New York, and they were told when they came to 770 Eastern Parkway, the Rebbe wanted to see them. Everyone who just came out, the group, the Rebbe wanted to see them. So they all went into the Rebbe's office. The Rebbe had his glasses on. He was studying. They started walking. The Rebbe said, "Is this everyone?" Made sure everyone came. When he was told that everyone is in the room, he closed the book, he took off his glasses, and he told them, "I would like for you all to go and visit Rabbi Moshe Feinstein." Moshe Feinstein was, in Lithuania, he was a leader of, he was what many would call the greatest halachic decisor of our generation, past generation. He died in the mid-80s. At that time, he was considered to be the world's greatest. Outside of Israel, he was the number one halachic authority. Around the world, everyone knew he was world renowned. He said, "I want you to go and visit Rav Moshe Feinstein." Okay, the Rebbe said, "Go." So they went from the Rebbe's office, and they went to pay a visit to Rav Moshe Feinstein. So they went to his office. These guys didn't even know who he was. In Russia, in the newspaper in Russia, they don't write about Rav Moshe Feinstein and his latest rulings. That's not what they're writing about in the paper exactly. So they had no clue who he was, but they went. And when they came to Rav Moshe's house, so first he spoke to the adults. Conversation with the adults. Because someone told him that one of the people there, he knew the entire Talmud by heart. He knew the whole Talmud by heart. So Rav Moshe said, "Is it true? Really? He knows the whole Talmud by heart?" So someone said, he said, "Not the whole half, maybe half. Maybe he knows half." So someone said, "It's only half. But whatever you ask him on, it's just going to happen to be the half that he knows. Anywhere you ask him will fall in the half that he knows." So Moshe appreciated that humor, and he smiled. It was funny. And then he turned to the children. After the conversation with the adults, he turned to the children. He said, "What have you guys been studying? What have you been up to?" So he said, "We're starting with the tractate of Kiddushin." Told them what subject they were in the middle of studying, and began to ask them a few questions. A little test to see if they knew their stuff. So he asks this boy, 15-year-old, a question, and he answered the question. And Rav Moshe begins to cry. He starts crying. So little boy, he says, 15, he said, "I thought I got scared in the beginning. I thought I offended him. I said something inappropriate. But then I realized he was crying tears of joy." He was overcome with emotion. He was overwhelmed by the fact that these Jews, children living in Russia, knew Talmud. They knew subjects in Talmud. A 15-year-old, under the conditions that they lived in, he was overwhelmed with emotion to witness such a miracle before his eyes. So he turns to the boys and he says, how did you manage to do it? Tell me, what's the secret? How did you do it? I was like, we're in America. Now, mind you, he came himself from Europe originally. But he escaped. He didn't have to live through at 15 what they were living through at 15. How did you do it? He wanted to know genuinely, how did you guys do it? So Rabbi Yankel Notik turns to him and he says, how did we do it? He says like this, did we have a choice? There was no other choice. In other words, what's your question? How did we do it? There's no alternative for it. What's the alternative? To be not Jewish. That wasn't an alternative. There's no reality other than this for us. If you set your mind and have that belief and understanding, so then the question doesn't even make sense. The question is a question of logic. You're looking for something logical. You want an explanation. There is no explanation. There's no choice. It's not something logical. It's something which is much, much deeper than that. It's emes, it's truth. It runs through, it's permeated our entire existence from the beginning all the way through the end, regardless of circumstance. So Gary, sometimes you come for the cookies, and we have to question, why are you really coming to Torah class? You coming for the cookies, or you come for the Torah? Maybe you just happen to come for the cookies. It's good when there's good cookies, but when Gary found out there was no cookies today, and he still was ready to stay, then we knew his relationship is a real one. And then we were able to pull out the cookies. Then we were able to pull out the other cookies. But so I told you it's connected to what we're going to talk about today, because this is the reality. We have to ask ourselves in a very real way where we're holding in terms of our Judaism. And if we can at any point in life reach this level and say that there's no alternative for this. There's no other way. It's not a question that needs an answer. That's why it's called the fear of God. It's only because I'm Jewish. That's it. This is the way a Jew does it. This is the way I do it. Doesn't make no sense to you. It may not even make sense to me either. That's okay. It's irrelevant. Making sense and logic is irrelevant. We have to have that commitment. That's the ultimate commitment. And we would think, so if it's meaningless, it's not meaningless, but if it's illogical, if there's no logic and it doesn't feel good, etc., so then it's a boring and a dark religion, a dark place to be. But you see something fascinating. What's fascinating is that this is what elicits praise from all the people around, even the non-Jews. They're mesmerized by this. How are the Jews and why are the Jews still around? They want to figure out, these Jewish people, what they have going for them. No matter what we throw at them, they still manage to be Jewish. If you pluck a few million, so that they still remain. They build, they rebuild, and they get stronger and bigger. That's the reality. It's Isha Yidis Hashem Hitisalo, a woman who's God-fearing. That's the one that elicits the praise. That's the one that elicits the praise from every single person around them. And it brings about the praise of the Jewish people for all the generations, all the way from Moses' generation, all the way until us down today. So every Friday night when we say this, we should think about this for a moment or two. And hopefully this will help us cement our own personal relationship with being Jewish. Anyone have any questions? Oh, I see a lot of hands going up.